I was rearranging the new line of washing machines in the display corner when he walked in. He looked lost, scanning the rows of shiny machines with a sort of helpless bewilderment. I watched him for a bit, trying to decide if he was just another window shopper or someone genuinely in need of help. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon at the store, so I figured I'd go over. "Need some help there?" I asked, leaning against the nearest washer with my arms crossed. He turned towards me, a bit startled. "Oh, yeah. My parents' washing machine just died, and I have no clue about these things." I couldn't help but smile. "You've come to the right place. What are you looking for?" "Something easy to use, energy efficient, big capacity?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Honestly, I don't even know where to start. My mom wants something that's easy on the bills and can handle loads of clothes." "That's pretty much every model these days," I chuckled, leading him towards the latest models. "Let's start with this one. It's got all the bells and whistles, energy efficient, large drum, and it's got a great warranty." He listened intently as I rattled off specifications and features, his eyes occasionally widening as if I were speaking a different language. We spent a good hour discussing the different models. He settled on a high-end model that promised longevity and efficiency. As he handed over his credit card, he gave a sheepish grin. "Thanks for all the help. I would have been here all day trying to figure this out." "It's what I'm here for. Glad I could help." He paused as he collected his receipt, something on his mind. "You wouldn't want to grab a coffee sometime, would you? I mean, as a thank you?" Coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into closing the place down. Over plates of half-eaten food, the conversation flowed effortlessly. I told him about my grandma, the only family I had known, and how after she passed, I was left with her old house, a little too big for just me. He listened, nodding, his face etched with understanding. "Must have been tough, being on your own," he said after a pause. "Yeah, but it's home. What about you? You mentioned a big family?" "Big and loud," he laughed. "I live with my parents and 2 younger sisters. It's chaos, but it's fun. I guess I can't imagine it any other way." It was Sunday afternoon when Tom and I pulled up in front of his parents' apartment. My stomach was all knots, part excitement, part nerves. Today, I was meeting his family. I hoped this would be the start of having that big, bustling family I'd always imagined. The door swung open, and there stood a woman with a flour-dusted apron and a warm smile. "Tommy," she exclaimed, pulling him into a tight hug. "And you must be Nellie. We've heard so much about you." "That's me," I managed, my voice a pitch higher than usual. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Anderson. Call me Linda, dear. Come in, come in." The apartment was buzzing. A TV blared from one corner, 2 girls were sprawled on the couch, each glued to their phones, and the scent of something baking filled the air. "These are my sisters, Jane and Ellie," Tom introduced as we shuffled inside. The girls glanced up, offering weak smiles, before diving back into their digital worlds. "Nice to meet you," I said, but they hardly noticed. We all settled into the living room, Tom and I on a love seat that had seen better days, his family scattered around. Linda brought over a tray of coffee and what looked like homemade cookies. "So, Nellie, Tom tells us you work at an appliance store?" Mr. Anderson, a stout man with a booming voice, started the interrogation over his rimmed glasses. "Yes, I do," I replied, trying to sound proud despite the simplicity of my job. "And raised by your grandma, that right?" Jane chimed in without looking up from her phone. "Yes, she raised me," I nodded, feeling a bit on display. Ellie snickered, not bothering to hide her amusement. "Explains the old lady vibes," she muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. I felt my cheeks heat up. Tom squeezed my hand under the table, a silent sign of support, but didn't confront his sister. "Dad works in construction, and I'm a school secretary." Linda filled in the silence, perhaps sensing my discomfort. "We're just a regular family." "Must be nice, though, having the whole house to yourself after, well, you know." Yeah, it's nice. I stumbled over my words, not sure how to navigate this conversation. The afternoon dragged on with small talk that felt anything but small. Every so often, a comment about my clothes or a jab at how quaint it must be living alone in a big house made me shrink a little more into the love seat. As we were getting ready to leave, Mr. Anderson slapped Tom on the back. "Take care of our boy, Nellie. He's not used to handling tough stuff around the house." I forced a laugh. "I think we'll manage just fine." In the car, the air felt heavy. I wanted to cry, to yell, to ask Tom why he hadn't stood up for me. Instead, I stared out the window, the buildings blurring past. Tom finally broke the silence. "They liked you, you know. They just have a weird way of showing it." I turned to look at him, words like weird and like jumbling in my mind. "Yeah," I muttered, unsure of everything but the sinking feeling in my gut. As we drove back to our quiet house, I couldn't shake the feeling of disappointment. Meeting the family wasn't supposed to be like this. But there I was, hoping things would get better. Our wedding was anything but the quiet, intimate day I had envisioned. Jane and Ellie turned it into their personal circus, taking over the spotlight with their loud laughs and flirty antics with my friends' husbands. It was mortifying. Tom and his folks just chuckled along, dismissing it as the girls just having fun. I felt like an outsider at my own wedding, watching the day get hijacked. Fast forward to just a few days after moving into my house with Tom. I came home early from work one day, ready to drop into my couch and zone out with some TV. But as I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the living room lights glaring through the window. Tom was supposed to be at work, and panic gripped me. Maybe it was a break-in? I called Tom, my voice shaking as I spoke. "Tom, did you leave the lights on? I think someone's broken into the house." He laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves. "Nah, it's probably just Ellie. I gave her a spare key. She needs a quiet place to do her schoolwork." Fuming, I stormed into the house, ready for a confrontation. There she was, Ellie, lounging on my couch, my laptop open in front of her, as if she owned the place. "What the hell, Ellie? That's my laptop." I snapped, my heart racing with anger. She looked up, unfazed, and shrugged. "Chill, Nellie. We're family now. I can borrow your stuff. I always take things from Jane without asking." "That doesn't work here, Ellie. You can't just take my things without asking." I tried to keep my voice steady, but inside, I was boiling. "Whatever," she muttered, eyes rolling as she reluctantly handed back the laptop. I snatched it from her, feeling a mix of relief and lingering outrage. The rest of the day, my mind raced with how to handle this. When Tom got home that evening, I was ready to lay into him. "We need to talk about your sister. She can't just walk in here and take my things. It's not okay." Tom sighed, the kind of sigh that told me he wasn't taking this seriously. "She didn't mean anything by it. Don't be greedy." That stung. I wasn't being greedy. I was asking for respect in my own home. But it didn't stop there. Ellie's visits became more frequent, each one more brazen than the last. She'd show up, make herself at home, eat our food, watch our TV, and leave a mess. Each time, she'd say the same thing. "Your house is so much nicer and quieter than our cramped apartment." I felt like I was losing control of my own space, my sanctuary turning into a free-for-all. Tom continued to dismiss it all, painting me as the unreasonable one for wanting boundaries. Saturday morning, and instead of the calm, lazy start I craved, it was chaos. Tom's parents and his sisters had turned my house into their weekend retreat, claiming it was too cramped at their place. "Morning, Nellie," Linda bellowed from the kitchen as I stumbled in, rubbing sleep from my eyes. "Hope you don't mind, we brought over some groceries. Thought we'd make breakfast here." Before I could even respond, Mr. Anderson, with a newspaper under his arm, commandeered the living room. "This couch is comfier than ours, don't you think, Linda?" Linda, busy unloading bags and cluttering my counters, just hummed in agreement. "Nellie, you got any coffee?" We ran out at our place. Yeah, it's in the cupboard. Help yourself, I muttered, my privacy shrinking by the second. Ellie and Jane were sprawled on the other couch, their belongings strewn all over. Ellie glanced up, her phone in one hand, a smirk on her face. Chill, Nellie, it's just for the day. Plus, your TV is way better than ours. As they settled in, turning my living room into a loud, messy hub, I felt my weekend slipping away. Tom, seeing my frustration mounting, pulled me aside. Babe, they just want to spend some time with us. What's the big deal? By noon, the house was in full uproar. Linda had taken over the kitchen, pots and pans clattering. Mr. Anderson had the TV blaring, football commentary echoing through the house. Jane and Ellie, meanwhile, had invited a couple of friends over, the front door seemingly revolving. Nellie, could you whip up some of your famous chili? The kids love it, Linda called over the noise, as if I had nothing better to do. I clenched my fists, forcing a smile. Sure, Linda. I'll get right on that. As I chopped onions, the sting in my eyes almost a relief from my brewing anger, Tom wandered in, peckish and oblivious. Smells good, babe. You're the best. I don't feel the best. I feel used, Tom. I slammed the knife down a little harder than necessary. He paused, a frown creasing his brow. It's just family, Nellie. Don't make it into something it isn't. The afternoon dragged on. Laughter and chatter filled the house, none of it mine. When dinner rolled around, I was back in the kitchen, serving up chili and fixing sides, the perfect hostess mask in place. As they ate, compliments mixed with casual intrusions about our lives. You should really consider a bigger TV, Nellie. This one's a bit small for movie nights, Mr. Anderson joked, mouth full. Yeah, and maybe some new couches too, ones that match, Jane added, laughter in her voice. Their words, meant in jest, felt like little digs, reminders that they saw this place as just an extension of their own home. By the time they left, late into the evening, the house was a mess, dishes piled up, furniture askew. Tom, ever the peacemaker, started tidying up, whistling as he worked. I stood in the doorway, watching the man I married breeze through the chaos like it was normal, like it was acceptable. Tom, this can't happen every weekend, I said, the day's frustrations boiling over. He stopped, bucket in hand, and looked up at me. They're just having a hard time adjusting to the smaller place. They need this. As I went to bed that night, the house finally quiet, I wondered how many more weekends I could handle, how many more invasions of privacy I'd endure before something had to give. 2 years had ticked by, each day blurring into the next with my house feeling less like my own and more like Grand Central Station. It was another Friday evening, one I'd hoped would be quiet, but hope was a luxury I seemed to have run out of. Jane, Tom's older sister, burst through the door with her usual flair for drama. Hey, Nellie, big favor to ask, she began, her voice ringing with a false cheer that set my nerves on edge. Rob's coming into town this weekend, and we really need the place to ourselves. You guys mind clearing out till Sunday? I paused, a dishcloth in hand, staring at her in disbelief. The gall of her request left me speechless for a moment. Tom, ever the family pleaser, was already nodding along. Sure, sis, no problem. We'll make plans, he chimed in, as if it was nothing, as if our home was just a motel to lend out. I snapped. Absolutely not, Jane. It's not happening. Tom looked at me as if I'd grown another head. Come on, Nellie, it's just one weekend. Just one weekend? I echoed, my voice sharp as a knife. It's always just this or just that. When is it just us, Tom? Jane's eyes welled up with tears, the kind that I knew were more manipulative than genuine. That's really cruel, Nellie. I thought we were family. You thought wrong, I retorted, my patience frayed to its breaking point. She stormed out, and Tom's gaze followed her, his expression a mix of confusion and disappointment. You're being too harsh, Nellie. That's not how you treat family, Tom muttered, his words cold and distant. That's exactly my point, Tom. When does this family start treating me with some respect? I shot back, but he just shook his head and walked away. From that evening, the atmosphere turned frosty. His family's visits became more unbearable. Dinners were the worst. One night, as I set down plates of my homemade lasagna, which used to be a favorite, the mood was palpably tense. Mr. Anderson took one bite and grimaced. "What is this, Nellie? It tastes off." Ellie, quick to pile on, snorted. "Tastes like slop, doesn't it?" The table erupted in laughter, even Tom chuckled, adding salt to the wound. "Guess I'm used to it by now," he joked, his words slicing through the last thread of my composure. I stood there, the laughter echoing around me, feeling like an outsider in my own home. My hands shook as I gripped the edge of the table. "If you don't like my cooking, you're welcome to eat elsewhere," I said, my voice low but seething with anger. Dinner ended with dishes clattering loudly as I cleaned up. Tom attempted an awkward peace offering later, but the damage was done. I couldn't shake the feeling of disrespect, of diminishment. That night, I moved my things into the spare room, the distance between us growing with each step I took. Saturday morning came too soon, and with it, a rude awakening that rattled me to my core. The sun hadn't even fully risen when I heard the creak of my bedroom door. There, in the dim morning light, stood my in-laws, Linda and Mr. Anderson, casually inspecting my room like they were at an open house. "What are you doing in here?" My voice was a mix of fear and irritation, barely above a whisper. They turned, almost surprised to see me in my own bed. "Oh, we're just checking out the room," Linda said with a laugh that sent shivers down my spine. "From today, this will be our room. It's the nicest in the house, you know." Mr. Anderson, nodding in agreement, added, "And this bed, it's perfect for my back. Much better than what we have at home." I sat up, clutching the blanket to my chest. "You can't just decide to take over my bedroom. It's my private space." Linda waved a dismissive hand. "Well, darling, things change. Our eldest is getting married and moving out, and we've given our apartment to Ellie and her boyfriend. We need a place to stay more often." Stunned, I got up and marched straight to where Tom was sipping his coffee in the kitchen, oblivious to the storm brewing. "Tom, your parents are trying to take over my bedroom. You need to tell them they can't do that." Tom looked between me and his parents, who had followed me into the kitchen. Instead of the support I desperately needed, he shrugged. "Mom and Dad need a more comfortable place. Why don't you just move your things down to the basement? We can fix it up nice for you." I felt like I'd been slapped. Move to the basement? In my own house? Tom's face tightened. "They're my parents, Nellie. They need to be comfortable. What about what I need? What about my comfort in my own home?" He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. "Why do you have to make everything so difficult? They're just trying to be closer to us." "Not us, Tom, you. I'm just the person who cleans up and moves out of the way," I retorted, my voice rising with each word. His parents just smirked, as if I was making a scene over nothing. "We're leaving for Jane's wedding," Linda chimed in, cheerfully ignoring my distress. "You'll have plenty of time to clear out your things and move to the basement." The room spun around me as they laughed, discussing their travel plans. I stumbled back to the bedroom, the walls closing in on me. They left the house, their laughter echoing in the hall. I started my morning with a call to the local locksmith. "I need all the locks changed today. Can you do that?" My voice was firm, the first real sense of control I'd felt in months. "Sure thing," the locksmith replied. "I can be there in an hour." While I waited, I packed up Tom's belongings. Clothes, gadgets, some books, everything went into boxes and bags. The locksmith arrived, a middle-aged man with a toolbox and a reassuring smile. "Where do we start?" he asked, looking around. "The front door, then the back, and there's a side entrance," I directed, leading him through the house. After he left, I stood in the middle of my living room, the new keys in my hand, feeling like I was truly seeing my home for the first time in a long time. The rest of the day was a blur of cleaning and rearranging. I moved furniture, hung new curtains, and even set up a small workspace for myself in the corner of the living room. The house had to look different, feel different when they returned. A week has passed, and Sunday morning dawned, and with it, the inevitable confrontation. I heard the car pull up, the voices outside. My heart raced, but I steadied myself. This was it. I watched from the window as Tom, his parents, and Ellie tried the front door, their confusion evident when their keys didn't work. Tom glanced towards the house, puzzled, then saw me standing at the window. "Nellie, why won't our keys work?" His voice was a mix of frustration and surprise. I opened the front door, standing firm in the doorway. "I changed the locks, Tom." "What? Why would you do that?" His astonishment was almost comical. "Because it's my house, and I'm taking it back," I replied, my voice stronger than I felt. "This is crazy, Nellie. We're family," Linda exclaimed, her usual commanding tone tinged with disbelief. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. I've been pushed out, disrespected, and ignored in my own home for too long," I said, meeting each of their gazes. Tom shook his head. "Nellie, let's just talk about this inside." "No, Tom. There's nothing left to discuss inside. You need to take your things, they're packed by the garage." His mouth fell open, the reality of the situation settling in. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm taking back my space. You decided whose side you were on, and now you can go back with them," I said, nodding towards his parents. The air was thick with tension as they reluctantly grabbed Tom's belongings. Words were exchanged, angry, pleading, confused, but I stood my ground. As their car finally pulled away, the profound silence of the house enveloped me. I leaned against the door, a tear escaping down my cheek. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of freedom. I woke up early that next morning, the sunlight streaming through my curtains with a promise of new beginnings. I had one thing on my agenda before I could fully embrace the freedom I had fought so hard for: mailing the divorce papers. I'd signed them last night, each stroke of the pen feeling like a step closer to reclaiming my life. I dropped the envelope in the mailbox, a heavy weight lifting off my shoulders with a soft thud as it landed. Now, it was just a matter of waiting. It didn't take long. The very next day, as I was rearranging my living room, trying to erase the remnants of a life I was eager to leave behind, I heard frantic knocking. It was Tom, clutching the envelope I'd sent, his face a mixture of disbelief and desperation. "Nellie, please, we can't end it like this. I've realized everything, I can change," he pleaded, his voice cracking under the strain. I leaned against the doorframe, the barrier between my new life and the past I was leaving. "Tom, you realized too late. Living here was just convenient for you. You were ready to send me to the basement while your family took over my house. Where was this realization when I needed you to stand by me?" Tom stood there for a moment longer, his shoulders slumping as the reality set in. Without another word, he turned and walked away. That was the last time I saw him. The divorce was quick. We didn't have much in the way of shared assets, and there were no children to consider, which simplified things. Within a few weeks, it was all over officially, but for me, it had ended the day I changed the locks. With my newfound solitude, an idea began to take shape, a project that would not only fill my time but also fulfill a childhood passion I'd long neglected. The basement, the very place Tom had suggested I exile myself to, would be transformed. I decided to turn it into a workshop where I could work on my woodworking, something I'd loved since I was a kid but never had the space or time to pursue seriously. I started clearing out the space, the physical labor a therapeutic contrast to the emotional turmoil of the past weeks. The buzz of the saw, the scent of fresh-cut wood, it was invigorating, a sign that I was building something new from the remnants of the old. Word got around about my new hobby. Friends started asking for custom pieces, and what started as a therapeutic activity quickly turned into a promising side business. My evenings were no longer about loneliness or resentment, they were filled with creativity and the satisfaction of creation. Meanwhile, rumors reached me about Tom and his family. They were still crammed into that tiny apartment, the close quarters breeding nothing but constant bickering and discontent. Part of me wondered if they regretted their choices, but mostly, I didn't care. They were no longer my circus, not my monkeys.